Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Shatterhand. In the last we started off the game and took out 3 out of the game stages, and now it's time for us to head to our next stage, the filtration plant. Now, something the manual also goes out of its way to explain is just outright the robots that we have with us. They're actually called the satellite robots, and something I find funny about them is that they describe them the boxes that we find the letter panels in as looking like script versions of B and L, which is just strange. Overall, it actually doesn't explain anything lore-wise about them, but the interesting thing is that there was actually something a bit different about the armor we get in the Japanese version. In the Japanese version, the coins were just outright points, and the armor we get at the end of our, whenever we get the same set of panels twice in a row, was actually just a giant gun. It still made you invincible and had the same firing effect, but still, that's kind of cool. The robot just outright transforms. That's awesome. Though I kind of like the armor a bit more. Either way, the filtration plant is our ice stage for the game, which sounds annoying, but the ice physics in this game honestly aren't that bad. You slide a little bit, but you don't have to worry too much, because Shatterhand himself actually controls very, very well. In fact, the game overall just controls good. Thankfully, this is also a game that's pretty hard to, like, lose forever. Because if I recall correctly, upon getting a game over, you're not going to see it this playthrough, you lose your high score, but you just get a continue and end screen, and we'll take you back to the top screen, but I think you just have outright infinite continues. So you don't have to worry about losing your progress too much. I think it just sends you back to the stage select, and everything you've beaten is stayed beaten, rather. And I know that sounds like it doesn't say too much about a game's difficulty. For instance, Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 had infinite continues in the American version, and those games were still hard as hell. But this game is closer to, I'd say, Castlevania 1 in difficulty, where it's a more fair kind of hard. Although you're going to want the armor for this upcoming section, because these fans, they suck, but they don't suck. They blow you right into the nearest wall, and in this portion, that's spikes. These spikes I don't think are instant kill. I think they're just damage, but you need to be careful, especially when they start placing them over ice in very thin, very, very thin corridors. Thankfully, that's the rest of the ones for the stage there. I believe you, as we see there, if you just hit the points bag with the armor, it's automatically 200s, so that's pretty cool. This section is probably my least favorite section out of the stage, though. Water physics. And Shatterhand is very floaty in the water physics department, even compared to some other games. You go all over the place. You have a lot more control over your jump than you think you would in the water still, but you want to be careful here, especially when it comes to these weird fan cog things. It's very easy to get damage down here. There's also a branching path when we first came down here to the left and right. To the right's where progress is. To the left, I think, is just a punch power-up, so not too necessary for me. The robot is all I need. Yeah, okay. Ooh, that's a bit precise. Now, my history with Shatterhand is admittedly quite a bit shorter than some of the other games I've played on the channel. I only found this game about 2.5 years ago, I think, at the time of this recording. I found it through that guide that was written by, I think the guy's name was Pat Contry. Basically a small little reviews and such of every NES game, including the unlicensed ones. And I just recall seeing Shatterhand in there, thinking it looked good, so I tried it out, and hey, it was good as the guide, the book said. And admittedly, I found a couple of games through that guide. It's how I also found the Power Blade games. What was the name of this one? It starts out as a shooter, but then becomes kind of more of a Blaster Master kind of game. Guardian Legend? My brain is what immediately goes to. Let me check really quick. Yeah, Guardian Legend. That's one I found through there. Same with... Let's scroll through here. What else did I find through there? Journey to Silius I knew about beforehand. Magic is Scheherazade, rather, is one that I found through there as well. The robot, once again, comes really in handy underwater because you can protect yourself from any given attacks. But those weird Zaku-looking things are probably the most annoying thing down here. And now it's time for the boss of this stage, which actually is not listed in the manual because for some reason the filtration plant, they forgot to put the boss down in the manual. It's this weird Zaku-looking thing again. This guy likes to stick towards the top of the water and will get heavily knocked back by any of your attacks. He'll either just shoot outright down or drop some little mines down, or he'll go to the bottom of the screen and try to zip across it with a bit of a lightsaber. You need to be careful of the cogs on the sides of the screen because those will still damage you, but as you can see overall, not a very hard boss. If you have some ranged attacks, you'll do pretty well. And that's Area D cleared. Overall, one of the more interesting stages from platforming gimmicks point of view, because you have the ice and the water, but if you don't like those gimmicks, it's going to be hell for you. Also, wait, I just checked the manual again. They did list the filtration plant stage. I said they didn't earlier, but no, they just listed it as Area E. There's 2 Area E's in the guide. Oh man, NES proofreading, you did not exist. The boss of that stage was Harp-Tune, and this next stage is the Anti-Gravity Research Center. Now, there are 2 contenders for my least favorite stage in this game out of the core selectable 5. This stage and the next one. This stage I like more than the next one overall, just because I think there's a bit more fun to be had in it. But it doesn't stop there from being some bullshit like those rocks. They fall in set positions, yes, but on your first playthrough, you're not going to know they are there. So unless you take a lot of time, and I do mean a lot of time, you're going to be taking some cheap hits. We also got these guys, which look a bit like the characters from Contra. They're a bit of an annoying enemy type in that they like to stay a set distance away from you before they start shooting, and they'll actively run away from you if you start to approach them. So you need to be kind of on the ball when it comes to attacking them, because otherwise you might take some cheap shots, but thankfully you can still deflect their projectiles with a simple punch to the bullet. Which sounds deadly, but it's really not. It's also pretty easy to get surrounded in situations like this as well. Oh boy. I like this stage more than the other stage I dislike. Mostly just because I think it does a bit more with its platforming stuff, I have to admit. I don't like either of these stages too much. In fact, if I could avoid them, I would, but because of the way this game works, I can't, so, well. Thankfully, this is one of the stages where they actually like to place quite a few of the health restorations. In fact, I say they get kind of far and few between, but that's because sometimes you feel like you need one in a dire moment when you're really close to the previous one. Also, yeah, this enemy gets neutered by the grenade bot. Obviously, you still have to get it first, but if you can, it's pretty easy to take out at that point. This is also the first stage where they really like to throw the fence gimmick at you, and you're going to want to learn to master this because the jumps with this can be a bit odd. Your positioning is wherever you're actually clinging to, not to where the rest of Shatterhand's body is. It's why I was actually touching the lava, I think, last part without taking any damage because my hitbox was above it. And you want to use that to your advantage because you can cling to just the very edge of some of these fences to get a slightly farther jump. And in fact, in one case, I think in the final stage it is, you want to do that because otherwise you're not going to make a certain jump that's really hard to make. This might also be the first stage they actually put arrows onto the fences. And I think it might be one of the only ones in the game now I'm thinking about it. Which is odd because they're in, I think the fences are in every stage except for maybe the intro stage. So you think they would have introduced that like that a bit sooner. Either way, we notice that there's a bit of a thing on the floor there. This is the main gimmick for this stage. Obviously it doesn't look like it's doing anything right now, but once we go through this door, it all changes because now it's reversed gravity. Your controls are not reversed. Left is still right and right is still left, vice versa. However, now you need to keep an eye on what's now above you is now below you, and so on and so forth. For instance, we got these weird sea urchin looking things. These things will actually move close to you if you get close enough to them, and I think they'll just try to touch damage you. However, you can destroy them pretty easily just by attacking them. And I think that causes their little projectiles that happens when they explode to not come in your direction, I think. Doesn't feel like it, at least. But after they switch gravity on us a couple times, they're going to start throwing this at us at a bit of a higher rate, in that we're going to start having that thrown at us in a method that combines it with jumping from floor to floor, basically. Also, this jump is kind of precarious to make with that enemy there, so I'll just take care of it from there. I think that's also another letter panel in that box up there, and I want to keep 2 betas for a 3rd one later on, so that I can take the armor into the boss fight. Also, thank God that the ceiling hazards don't actually damage the robots. I think the only thing that can outright damage the robots are enemy-type hazards, such as these, or the flamethrowers / water jets in the submarine stage. So they're at least a little bit lenient with that. Now, this game was developed by Natsume at the time, who we now nowadays mostly for things like Harvest Moon. I think some of the Gundam fighting games? And I think they also did some of the various Power Ranger games over the years as well, like the SNES games. So they have some good pedigree to them, but this game just didn't sell that well, partially because I think this game came out rather late in the NES's lifespan. Yeah, this was 1991 in the US. Super Nintendo was already out by that point, so this was at the point where they were kind of slowing down production on NES games. But it was also published in the States by Jaleco, who I think I know them mostly for, I think, the Boy and His Blob games, as well as I think most of the Maniac Mansion ports. And that's kind of a rough thing for them because while those guys did publish some good games, or developing with some of them, Jaleco was probably not the best publisher for them in terms of name recognition. If they had somehow gotten Capcom to do that, maybe this game would have been remembered more, or at least at the time. This game actually has a pretty good-sized fan base now, and it's a well-regarded game. But yeah. Either way, we're coming up on the boss for this stage. I know this video is a bit shorter than the last one. That's because with the way that I split the parts up, something was going to be around 13 minutes long, so might as well keep it in the middle and keep the beginning and climax longer. The boss for this stage is, I believe this thing's name is Gravitas? It's a weird ghost enemy. And this boss doesn't actually have many active attacks aside from touch damage and the obvious floor hazards. But its main gimmick is that it will randomly reverse gravity on you. It'll do that by firing a projectile either at the ceiling or background, and you know which gravity well you're kind of in, depending on the background's color. When it's green, we're heading towards the ground. When it's another color, we're heading towards the ceiling. The only main attack it really has is that weird little scatter shot it just did, and it doesn't like to do that too often. I almost think they're trying to intend for the main enemy of this to be the controls more than anything. Also, if you hit it off screen, it can actually get knocked from side to side. It's not supposed to actually travel from side to side of the screen like that, but yeah. Overall, honestly, despite the stage being rather hard, I think the boss is pretty pathetic. Overall, not a bad stage. I think the beginning and some of the weird gimmicks like the rocks early on are a bit too out of nowhere for their own good, at least without a good tutorial for them. But the anti-gravity itself, not too bad, pretty fun. Overall, solid stage. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 3, we'll be heading off to Endgame, actually. See you guys then.